everyone, and welcome to Backseat Sports. I'm Josh, that is Caleb, and today we are going over the big news, kind of summarizing some of the massive additions to Nebraska's defense, summarizing the spring here with the transfer portal, a lot of big additions throughout the spring, and then going through the depth chart and giving the maybe early predictions about what this depth chart is going to look like, starting deep on the defensive side here for Nebraska. And we have a lot to talk about today. Caleb, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, Josh. Yeah, it's an exciting time with all the transfers. And yeah, I mean, when you get all these cool new recruits, these new toys to play with on the defensive end, I mean, your mind immediately goes to how does this affect our starting defense? And it'll be fun to pontificate what is going to happen, place them in. And yeah, I'm excited to see these guys next year and how it benefits us.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when you're talking about like how many guys we've lost and the ins and outs of the transfer portal with the madness that's caused this season, with 12 transfers have joined Nebraska's team this offseason already. Yeah, not to mention the recruiting class. So the amount of pieces you have to kind of adopt and figure out where they fit in here is insane. So we're gonna have a lot to talk about today, obviously, going through it all. And, we're going to kind of break down some of the transfers and the guys who are going to be impactful when we talk about their position group. So, we'll kind of be going through it as we go along. And I think today we're starting in the secondary, specifically at safety, going position by position about where we think they're going to start. First of all, we think there's kind of a debate right now about what Nebraska is going to run defensively, whether we're going to run 3-4, whether we're going to run 4-3. And last year we ran multiple D and did a lot of both. And at the start of the season, we were a little bit more 3-4, and we kind of started shifting and using more and more 4-3s as the year went along. And so the question is this year is how does our personnel fit with those schemes? And I don't know, my personal opinion, I can't like to hear your opinion, is kind of like, I think we're going to run a little bit more 4-3 this year than we're going to run 3-4.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we ran the multiple defenses last year. We both talked about it a lot, how we would use one of our linebackers and we'd line them up on the defensive
3-point stance
on the line. And we saw that a lot last year. And I think that could really be a lot of the case again, but maybe even more so with now some of the transfers and maybe just how those linebackers
losing
have more
JoJo Doman.
Exactly. And how those linebackers have more developed into pass rushers anyway. I think that's really a high percentage chance that, a vast majority of our snaps this year, we could still call it 3-4, but I think a vast majority of the snaps will be more of a 4-3 type look.
Yeah, so this is our template right here. And so we're going to be rocking with the 4-3 look on the template. But, again, you can kind of look at it in a 3-4 stance as well, with considering, one of the outside linebackers is one of the DNs, depending on what happens, like, Garrett Nelson and whatnot. So we'll see. We'll go through all that when we get to that point. So let's start in the secondary here and talk about these safeties. So Caleb, where are you at the safeties? Who do you think is going to start here? Talk about whether or not it's clear cut or if there's maybe some competition there.
We've kind of talked about it last video too, how we've lost 10 of our top 12 highest defensive rated players on PFF.
Yeah, of guys who had 50 snaps.
These snaps. So we're replacing a lot. Luckily, one of the guys that we're not this year, who we've seen play for us at both corner and safety, is Miles Farmer. So I think he's kind of one of the locks for us at safety this year. He's been a mainstay, has made big plays for us in multiple games in the Big Ten before. So I think it's kind of a lock that we will see Miles Farmer as one of our starting safeties this year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to replace Deontay Williams and Markel Dismuke last year. The Infinity Stones who were on the team for so long because of COVID and like 6-year seniors and whatnot. But I mean, like last year, PFF's had us ranked as the 11th best or the 11th best in the Power 5 in pass coverage last year. And a lot of that contributed, with JoJo Doman, Cam Taylor-Britt, then Markel Dismuke and Deontay Williams, the veterans there. So there's some big shoes to fill here in the secondary. So I'm with you there. He's going to be a lock without a doubt. So I mean, we're locking in Miles Farmer for sure. And then I think the question comes here, who's going to be that other safety? And it might depend on what the down in situation. It might not be a fully locked in situation right now, but I think we're both leaning right now Marquez Buford as the second starting safety, but it's a legit competition there with guys like Deshaun Singleton, Noah Pola-Gates.
Pola-Gates, I think definitely we'll see some playing time this season. I definitely lean toward Buford as well. Just, I guess, from what we've seen, but I think Noah Pola-Gates has a real chance.
Yeah, Buford last year, he was a cornerback, so he actually transferred to safety this year. I mean, the inverse situation of Cam Taylor-Britt, where early in his career, he was a safety, then swapped to corner and played really well and was, obviously just got drafted this year. Fantastic. But Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. I really like the prospects of Buford at safety with those hands, but Fisher was praised in Buford throughout the spring, and his ability to really cover ground and make some plays around the line of scrimmage as well. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that ends up playing out. So now let's move on to the cornerbacks and kind of rock and roll there. So how you feeling with the corners?
We have some familiar faces in the cornerbacks. I think Quinn Newsome, I'd probably put as kind of the lock for our cornerback this year. Again, he played a ton last year. He'll be a lock to be one of our corner spots for this year, barring anything crazy happening. And then really, I think it's the second cornerback spot that's really the interesting one. Tommy Hill's been getting a lot of buzz, the Arizona State transfer from last year. Cam Taylor-Britt likes him a lot. He's bigger, more of that more physical role.
Yeah.
Maybe more toward the Cam Taylor-Britt. Obviously not saying he's going to be the same player, but we'll be wearing the same number as him this next year too. I think it's between him and Braxton Clark, but again, I think both of them, I think all three could see the field with each other at the same time. But I think Tommy Hill might get the edge over Braxton Clark.
I mean, with Braxton, that's the thing. In the spring game, Braxton outsnapped him and looked all right. And so, we've always had this thing with veterans on this team and getting that early start. So I wouldn't be surprised if Braxton's there at the beginning of the year, but I would fully expect Tommy Hill to take that starting job by, game 3 or 4 at the latest, or potentially starting right off the rip. So that's why we have him as the starter, but there is a world where Braxton's out there off the start of the season and see what happens with the veteran leadership. So yeah, I think it's gonna be really interesting. I'm right with you there on both of them. I think there's a few other guys that have still a chance there with Javier Morton and Omar Brown coming in as transfers. I mean, Morton from JUCO transfer from Garden City Community College, and then Brown from Northern Iowa. So there is a world where, if one of those guys flash here heading into the fall, then maybe you have a pretty big competition there for the second cornerback spot. But I think we're in a pretty good spot overall with Tommy Hill and or Braxton Clark there at the cornerback too. So now this is where it starts getting a little juicy.
Yeah.
The linebacking position's interesting. Again, now running this 4-3 and with some of the talent that we saw last year, the flashes of opportunity from these guys. So let's start with kind of the outside linebacker role. Where are you at with these guys? Yeah,
Isaac Gifford's been the name that's been buzzed around kind of in that outside linebacker nickelback position for a while.
JoJo Doman's heir.
Yes. The heir apparent, but that's too big of shoes to fill. I think that we'll give a different defensive look with Isaac. Again, obviously his older brother Luke was a really good outside linebacker for us and made a lot of tackles. I think Isaac's almost better in coverage than Luke, but maybe not as good on the line of scrimmage as his brother. So I think, again, he'll be in that coverage situation, but also can make some tackles for us. That's something that he still really needs to improve on, I think, on the grades.
He had a lot of problems tackling in space last year. It was tough. To say the least.
Luckily, it has an offseason, so hopefully he can get a little bit bigger, faster, stronger, work on some of those angles a little bit more, and we'll be ready to rock and roll for the season. But with how much faith the coaching staff has in him, and again, as good as his brother was too, I think hopefully, and he's pretty young, I think there's still a lot of room for opportunity for growth for him. And I think by the end of the season, he'll be a pretty good player.
The stain on his season last year was the Iowa game, where he was just, he couldn't make a tackle. I mean, that game was really ugly. So outside of that game, you're like, okay, maybe, we were pretty high on Gifford after some of the other games that he played in throughout the year. So it's possible, I think we could see a really, really, really good Gifford this year. But yeah, I'm with you. It's definitely going to be in a pass coverage role. I don't think it's a lock that he's a full-time outside linebacker. It depends kind of how we end up running the system and whether we're running 4-3 or 3-4 and exactly what that looks like. So that's where it gets a little bit messy considering we're running the multiple Ds here and how that could look like. Like JoJo last year, he was the 6th highest ranked linebacker in the country on PFF. 5th highest ranked in pass coverage in the country last year. That's the country. He was really good. And
really good.
So filling into that role it's not going to be easy. That's why I think we're going to try and be throwing some different looks this year and filling that hole in different ways.
The other thing is, JoJo's so good at pass rushing too. Again, he was just an absolute nightmare for the other offenses to scout. So that's just, he's a tough band-aid to fill where, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
It is
for the whole defense as a whole to replace him.
Yeah. So on the opposite side of of Isaac Gifford's no surprise. I mean, it's going to be Luke Reimer out there as the other outside linebacker and or middle linebacker if we're running, 3-4. Reimer had a really interesting season last year, obviously, where in pass coverage, he was great. And I think this is a big reason why we think we're going to run 4-3. Reimer, like last year, he was the second highest ranked in the PFF in the Big Ten in pass coverage, only behind JoJo Domann. So it's like you have that going for you, but then he was the 6th worst ranked in run stopping last year. So it's like in the Big Ten. So it's like, you got the pros and cons with a guy like that. We hope to see that improvement when it comes to the point of attack and making tackles in the gaps and really getting up towards the line and being physical. But we saw his dominance in pass coverage last year multiple times, taking over games and making plays. So yeah, I mean, he's a lock for sure to be out there without a doubt. So Caleb, who's the middle linebacker? What are we thinking about this middle linebacker position?
As I mull on it more, I think that this competition might be closer than we think it could be.
Ooh.
Nick Henrich, again, a lot of people like him, but again, just wasn't great tackling. Like he needed help.
Run stop.
He wasn't that effective. And I think Ativa Magla-Clements could be better than him in this category. And it's really what we need this year. I think that that's going to be a close competition going into the fall. And I think Nick will get it because he's had more experience. But I don't know. As the season goes on, I think Ativa Magla-Clements could really make some moves. So just the more I think about it, I like Ativa Maga. He showed a lot good during the spring game as well. Nick will start the season.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see exactly like what ends up happening with Henrich. I wouldn't say there was anywhere where he even like thoroughly excelled. He was just consistent, but nothing flashy. And so it'll be interesting to see exactly. That's kind of been our MO for middle linebackers at Nebraska recently, with guys who just are like, they're all right. With that said, we now go to the defensive line. And this is where things get a little messy considering the amount of players, that have dipped out of the program this year for whether it's the draft or through transfers. Casey Rogers, Damian Jackson, Ben Stilley, Damian Daniels, DeAndre Thomas, Feldarius Payne, Jordan Riley are all gone. Insane.
That's a lot.
And so only 2 remain. Garrett Nelson. Well, really 3 if you count. It depends if you count Caleb Tanner, which he's listed as outside linebacker, but really probably like half of his D end really. So you really got Ty Robinson and Garrett Nelson, and then Caleb Tanner. It's kind of like the remaining guys who had their hands in the dirt last year who actually played. So it's insane. It really is. And so where are you at right now? I mean, I guess we kind of mentioned some of these guys. Let's start with the more obvious ones. Where are you at with some of these guys starting?
Like you mentioned, Garrett Nelson's the one guy who started. So I think that's a pretty obvious one. And, I think the brightest spot returning on our defense.
I was going to ask, is he the guy you're most excited about this year?
Yeah, again, he was really good getting to the quarterback last year. That was his. He was pretty solid at that, rushing the quarterback.
He looked fast in the spring game. I mean, he looked like he had some juice.
So if he can take the step up on the defensive end, that'd be very exciting for Nebraska. Yeah. We haven't had a really good, an
elite pass rusher
in a long time. It's been a long time since we have a guy that's really can add up sacks. And I think the 4-3, again, if we do run it, we will get to the quarterback more, which is something I think we need with an inexperienced secondary. And, again, our linebacking core, just how we're going to figure this all out. Shenander has a lot of moving parts this next season.
I know.
I think it's probably for the best. And I think, again, Garrett Nelson really provides that for our team and is exciting for this upcoming season.
For this defense to be like, really, we have so many new guys. For this defense to be like in the good category, he basically has to be Randy Gregory. He's the one guy where you can kind of see that where the path to the next level is like at least possible. We're like, okay, if he can get to that next level, then suddenly this defense, it gets pretty interesting. But man, when you're losing that many players who are contributing and there's so many question marks with other guys, that's where it's like right now the defense is still pretty questionable and we have to see these pieces kind of fall into place in the fall. But I'm excited for Garrett Nelson, man. I really, really am. And I am right with you on all of that. So
he also gives the best interviews. So, he's got that going for him too.
He is the coolest guy on the defense without doubt. So the energy's unmatched.
Next at defensive end, there's just a giant competition. I think Ochaun Mathis will lock down the starting position, but I think Caleb Tanner and even Jamari Butler will see some time on the field. But I think you can put in Ochaun Mathis. I mean,
so this is where we got to talk about him. So
yeah,
obviously
exactly.
This was the big news of the last few weeks. Ochaun Mathis was the highest rated remaining player in the transfer portal from TCU. And he had 2 years of eligibility left. He's already played 4 years at TCU and has 2 years of eligibility left.
Insane.
And, he was pretty highly rated on PFF the past few years, or well rated as like a fringe starter type player, like a 68 or 61.7 rating in 2021 on 650 snaps. In 2020, a 75.1 rating. That's a legit player with 544 snaps. And he specializes in pass rush, which is his best attribute. So, I mean, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that edge guy to match up across from Garrett Nelson. And Mathis seems to be that guy. And we paid to make sure that was the case. I mean, he is paid well in NIL for coming to Nebraska.
NIL deals, yeah. So,
I mean, over $500,000 reportedly for Ochaun Mathis in NIL deals coming to Nebraska. Insane. I mean, if you go back and watch our NIL video, we did talk about, we're like, I'm interested to see what happens with this. How much does this escalate quick? And boy, did it escalate quickly. I mean, NIL deals of $500K for a good transfer player, but like this dude's not Aiden Hutchinson, No. I mean, this is insane. So absolutely crazy. I mean, how do you feel about Ochaun? Like, I mean, obviously it's a good get. I mean, I'm excited about it. But how do you feel?
So, I mean, I don't think he's a 500K dude, but hey, I think with him and Garrett Nelson, again, he was a second team all Big 12 last year. So he's a solid player for TCU. I think that it could be good. I think it'll be good for us. And I think
it's what we needed,
Yeah. And again, we needed this position badly. So I totally get it. But man, will it live up to how much he got paid? Only time will tell. I hope so. I really, really hope so.
Yeah, facts. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, he's the most interesting player without a doubt so far. Like out of this starting lineup, we're like, what's the what if here? And we need him to be like elite probably. But that's the question. So I mean, there's a debate here, obviously, with Ochaun Mathis and then Caleb Tanner, who's been a very consistent player for us over the past few years. And then also the redshirt freshman Jamari Butler, who's coming off of a really solid spring game with a lot of hype behind him as well. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how Caleb Tanner, Jamari Butler fit into that equation. So I'll list, have Caleb Tanner here as well as one of the guys. And without a doubt, Ochaun Mathis and Caleb Tanner are both going to equally see the field, at least early on, probably, for the coaches to get a good feel for where they're at in game situations. And so it'll be interesting to see exactly how that ends up playing out. I think both of us lean Mathis in the long term, which is why we have him as the projected starter right now. But it could easily be a full split early on in the season.
Yeah, I think Caleb Tanner could fill in on either side of, and Garrett Nelson.
Yeah.
Needs a break too. So,
and also don't rule out, I'm sorry to cut you off, but also don't rule out these guys, sliding back to linebacker roles and potentially, working with either maybe, who knows, Henrich or, depending how Isaac Gifford plays, Isaac Gifford at outside linebacker. So it is possible that we could see some movement there with the depth chart as the season moves along.
As a fan, you want to see Garrett Nelson and Ochaun Mathis on both sides creating havoc, getting sacks this season. Again, that's just something that Nebraska hasn't in a long time really had a ton of sacks per season. And so just even a prospect, a chance of that happening this year where we are getting turnovers, strip sacks and all that. Again, that would be a ton of excitement. And again, something our defense desperately needs going into this season.
With Mathis as well, it's just another reason why the 4-3 makes a lot of sense, where he specializes. His preferred ability is pass rush. You pair him with Garrett Nelson, and then both your outside linebackers would absolutely specialize in pass coverage. So just everything falls into place for this to make sense for a 4-3, which is why we think it's going that way. But all right, defensive tackles here. How are we feeling about the D tackles?
Again, the other guy that has really only seen the field is Ty Robinson. With Garrett Nelson on this line, I would assume that he would get the start. Again, he had a disappointing season last year. Again, he had such a promising first year. A lot of people were like, can he make the jump? Can he really be an NFL type guy going into the next season? And I think it was underwhelming for most fans. But again, there's always next year. So hopefully this year we can see some improvement, but I think we're going to need a lot from him because it was really mediocre at best. From him. I think there's still a couple steps he can take. And but I think he will get the start again.
He's definitely built more like a D tackle. So I think it makes a lot more sense for him to be like Because, I mean, there were times last year where we were lining him up as an edge rusher, depending on the situation in 3-4. So it's like, depending on the strong side of the line here, he's lining up on the outside shoulder of a tackle. It's like, this guy is like 6'6", 305. And this dude should not be lined up out there. So it's just like, in my head, it makes again, another reason why it makes sense for to be in 4-3 here, to let him thrive on the inside, run, stop, and make tackles, you know, in the 1-2 gaps.
I mean, again, think about how much that help our inside linebackers, whether that's Henrich or Atiba Maga-Clements too. I think agreed, like he could be a pretty solid run stopper type guy for us. Yeah, I definitely agree with you that he is built way more like a defensive tackle than a defensive end.
Yeah. All right, last one. Who we got here? Final D tackle.
Our another transfer, exciting. We're gonna plug it in there. Devin Drew,
yes, sir.
From Texas Tech. 1 year of eligibility remaining. PFF ranked him at a 70.1 in 2020 and a 68.2.
Again, very respectable.
And again, he specializes in run stopping. Again, that's something that's hurt us last year. Our linebackers aren't that good at the run stop. It's just, that's the way it is. Reimer, Henrich, nobody was really that good at it. And that's why we had to play, Deontay Williams down and bring him down toward the line of scrimmage. And that's why we were good at run stopping towards the beginning of the year. And why he went down, it was so much worse. So if we switch to the 4-3, we have 2 big defensive tackles in there that can stop the run. I think that this makes so much sense for our defense going into next year.
Oh yeah, I mean 100%. And like again, that 68.2 rating and 70.1 from 2 years ago. I mean that's a really respectable rating. And like for a guy who played in 13 games at Texas Tech, I mean that's exactly what we needed. I mean again, the 68.2 rating would make him the 6th highest ranked player from last year's contributing players with over 50 snaps on our defensive side. So I mean, that's a guy who should be the starter if all things are pointing that way, if he fits into the system, which again, signs point to he will. So I'm right with you. I think that's the most interesting guy, but there are a few other spots where that could play out. Again, experience, being in the program longer. Who else is potentially option there?
Yeah, Nash Hutmacher is been there a while, but again, I think Drew again is a little bit better of the player. There's a lot of promise for this defense. Again, some youth. Maybe means some chances for them to step up and be good. Again, our defense loses so much this season that it's going to be, but again, like towards that end of the year, we slipped as we went deep into the Big Ten play. So there's really chances to improve. And again, with a lot of new guys and the prospect of pass rushing for the first time in a long time at Nebraska can give us some glimpse of hope. Yeah, but man, we got big shoes to fill with JoJo and Cam not being there next year.
100%, man. It's gonna be wild. So that's it for the breakdown of the defensive depth chart. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and let us know if you want to see the offensive depth chart breakdown or predictions next week. Down to do that as well for sure. And then we'll probably want to do some sort of video on like the upside and downsides, like maybe the potential of maybe both sides of the ball. So if that's something you guys are interested, drop your comments down below. We'll be having more off-season content heading your way very soon as well. Appreciate you guys for hanging out with us. But as always, I'm Josh. That's Caleb. This has been Backseat Sports, and we will see you next time.
Go Big Red.